Today, I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Richard Lewis and Zaheer Hooda. So let's start with an introduction of both of them. Rich, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. So, yeah, sure. My name is Richard Lewis. I lead our EMEA sales function. I've been at Cytora for around 6-7 months now, but my background is in insurance-specific applications for the last 14 years or so. I joined from Salesforce, where I was responsible for their insurance practice focusing on their middle office and back office applications. So underwriter workbench, policy admin, quote rate apply, ethanol, claims, billing, etc. And then prior to that, I was working for Oracle in their marketing application space, again, focusing on insurance as well as financial services. So great to be here.
Thank you, Rich. Zaheer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited to chat today. I joined Cytora a few years ago to head North America sales and operations. My specific role is how do we work closely with US carriers to help them achieve however they want to digitize their risk objectives. Prior to Cytora, I was with Hiscox US, a commercial insurance carrier where I led their data, analytics, and automation. And prior to that, I was at McKinsey for several years, focused on the intersection of technology and service-based organizations.
Thank you both. So, and yeah, as we said, or as I said earlier, we're going to focus today on the process in which, like, when insurers are starting to think about digitizing their core workflows, like how do they go from thinking about improving metrics, like how do you improve productivity, how do you boost your broker service, how do you drive consistent decision making around the organization? So from those objectives into actually driving the business impact. And obviously the first steps in that process is considering like what is the technology they need to deploy to achieve them. So the first question for you, Zaheer, is as insurers and brokers are thinking about embarking on these risk digitization initiatives, like what areas do you think are important for our clients to make sure they get right?
Great question. So when we're talking to clients and they're thinking about this digitization journey, it usually starts at some level of one platform or two platforms. So the key question underneath that is, within these platforms, what are the specific capabilities that they would signify, that for them it would signify a successful implementation? And for that, we see 5 specific areas across deployments. One is the most obvious in our category, at least, is extraction performance. This is straightforward but key, but often gets confused with just simply extraction. So the key question, if you step back again from a carrier's perspective, is can the platform achieve the level of automation that they're looking for in that specific use case? So data extraction is definitely one of them, but another piece of that is the full digitization suite. When we talk about digitization, that includes many areas: enrichment, inference, business rules applications. So the performance, I would say, is that first piece. Second, you move into how much of the full intake spectrum can we handle for them? Because the reality is these operating models that are internal to an organization are not segmented by the intake spectrum, right? So you have everything coming in usually through one funnel or maybe a couple different entry points. So these operations include multiple different document types. So that's at least one angle of it. Can you handle unstructured loss runs to structured SOBs and proposal forms? The other angle of it is transaction types. So you also have, outside of just new business, you have claims, renewals. Can you handle all of that? So the key is, do the clients gain the confidence that the platform can handle this diversity across these multiple spectrums on the intake? Now let's talk about, we've talked about performance, the ability to handle everything that comes through the door. The next is how quickly can you scale across the organization? Now, for folks that have been in the insurance world, you know that systems, implementations, policy admin systems, or what may be, can take months or even years to scale. So the key question here is, can clients scale quickly, let's say within months, right? So they need to see that power is the key point, that can they scale quickly within months and that they have that power within their hands, specifically across multiple lines of businesses and use cases. And I would say the key point here is without vendor dependency. Fourth, what is their target state architecture? What does their existing tech stack look like? It's critical to understand that and then to understand where our platform fits within that tech stack. The IT teams, the tech teams, the business teams need to feel comfortable that whatever comes from our platform can easily, quote unquote, integrate with their downstream system, automatically mapping outputs from what comes from us to their downstream system. So how do we demonstrate that bit as well? And then finally, within our category, probably more important than other categories, is the human in the loop experience. We know exceptions are going to happen. That's just the reality of these complex insurance flows. So what do you do to manage these exceptions? There's probably two different areas. One is, can you alert the user when human engagement is needed? And then the second piece of it is, once the human is engaged, once the person is engaged on the team, the admin team, the ops team, how do we make it easy for them to find and correct the right data values? I think priorities may vary by organizations, but really across these 5 areas, if we can provide confidence that we can pull that off, then that gives them confidence that this would be a successful digitization deployment.
That makes sense. So I think you've touched on those 5 areas. So one is the digitization performance, the accuracy of the data underwriters will receive, then the ability to digitize the full intake. I think the third one you mentioned was the ability to quickly scale across all lines of business and geographies. Then you touched on being able to support the target state. And the fifth one was the what is the human in the loop operational experience of the day-to-day operations. Let me just jump into Rich. So I guess the first step, once they define those 5 as their key priorities, the next step is typically doing a proof of concept or a proof of value. So how do those 5 dimensions translate into the way they structure these POCs?
Yeah, really good question, Juan. So in my view, they need to be directly linked to the 5 points that Zaheer has just talked through. So in line with, looking at your accuracy and looking at your extraction performance, what you're trying to do within a proof of concept is to create an environment it's as realistic as it possibly can be and as close to what it will look like in a production environment as possible. So one of the ways that we advocate in terms of doing that, and don't get me wrong, it puts us under a lot more pressure and gives us more grey hairs than I care to think about. But one of the ways is that we process these risks, these documents live within a hands-on workshop. So as Zaheer mentioned, it's really important to get a really good cross-section of input documents, of submissions, and that you're providing those to help us to configure the platform. But then you also hold back a bunch of those so that you can run through those live in the workshop. And that's the ultimate measure. We've really moved away from the times where a platform would require 2, 3, 4 weeks to prepare for a proof of concept. Training models is just doesn't really exist anymore, and it's very much a legacy approach. So we really advocate for these live submissions and I'd say getting it to be as realistic as it can be in terms of that process. So the second piece is really around that comprehensive data set. So making sure that it's a representative data set for the type of intake that you would look to manage. So make sure that you're including whatever's important for you. So it might be accord forms, application forms, it might be loss runs, it might be SOVs, bordereaux. It could be claims notifications, whatever that kind of use case is that you define, making sure that you test a wide array of types of documents, from structured, unstructured, handwritten, semi-structured documents in all different formats, from PowerPoints to PDFs to Excels. So making sure that there's a really robust, varied input that's representative of what you're going to see on a day-to-day basis. The third is really around showing the usability of the platform and the ability for clients to scale new use cases, adding new data points, creating brand new schemas within that specific session. So that could be another line of business. It could be that you look at a particular new business underwriting flow and then compare that to how that might look for endorsements, MTAs, renewals. It could be that you say, if you compare underwriting with claims, for example. So that's a really important point as well. The fourth point, I guess, is really around understanding the target architecture and as importantly, what the target workflow will look like. So often the typical entry point for our clients is integrating with an email inbox, and that's the ingestion point. Sometimes the workflow is that it may be the email documentation may be surfaced from within an underwriter workbench or from within a portal. And again, on the output side, thinking about that target workflow, is that going to are you configuring the target output schema to be aligned with the downstream systems that you're looking at, be that a workbench, be that a pricing tool, be that the policy admin system. So that's really important as well. The final point is really around the exception handling. So making sure that you're not just setting these sessions up just for the underwriters, that you're actually bringing on board the underwriting assistants, the operations team. So when it comes to things like the human in the loop for the exception management, making sure that they're confident and comfortable within leveraging the capabilities that exist within the various different platforms that are available in the market. So I guess those are the kind of 5 elements, the way that I think about things and align that, I guess, with the business outcomes and the dimensions that kind of Zaheer talked through earlier.
I love that too. And just one point to add to build on Rich's kind of 5 key areas, which of course are running lockstep, right? Because at the end of the day, just to reiterate that, if we have 5 clear business objectives of how a client sees us being successful, the POC needs to resemble that as much as possible. It is the best proxy for them. So after several POCs, this is kind of where we've landed as an organization. So that's where Rich talks about all of these areas. Anything that we're doing in our POC has to be tightly linked and coupled with one of the 5 areas that we talked about, or we need to change it. And if they don't see that, then we'll refine the POC, but that is the crux of all of this.
So it sounds like the kind of, based on what you were saying, Rich, like a key element in that POC is that live workshop session that you were just describing. I guess 2 questions in one, which is probably not what I should do, but I'll do. I think one is what does it look like, the timeline of executing a POC? But then if you could also deep dive into that live POC session, like what happens in that session, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So the way that I think about these things, I guess, is everything's centered around this live proof of concept. So that's processing submissions, intake live within that session, not knowing how the platform is going to, not knowing how the platform is going to respond. So that can be, as I said earlier, quite nerve-wracking, but it's the ultimate test of the capability of the platform. So really important, I guess, that's the main focus part. But there's obviously a lot of preparation that would need to go in from a client perspective to make sure that they're getting the most out of that session. So in terms of the preparation, I would say there's probably 4 critical steps that, in terms of data points, that we would expect clients to bring to the table to help us prepare for that. So one is pretty much aligned to the conversation that we've just been having between ourselves and the points that Zaheer made. So agree exactly what that success criteria looks like. If you're going to be evaluating vendors across a bunch of criteria, be really specific in terms of what those success points are, to allow you to do a qualitative and quantitative assessment across those dimensions. So that success criteria is going to be critical. The second thing is provide your target output schema. So if you're select a particular line of business, and based on that line of business, make sure that you're providing a comprehensive schema and define that in a way that is required, that your output platforms require the structure that is required for those downstream systems. So we've got the success criteria, we've got the schema. The next piece is, once you've defined your schema, is to provide a ground truth. So along with the success criteria, the ground truth is basically the expected values that you're anticipating the platform to deliver. It's almost how you're marking the accuracy level from the extraction performance. And it's really, really important that you do this on a manual perspective, having an underwriter or a claims handler go through and pick out the various different data points across that ground truth. You can't do it from an extraction from a policy admin system, because there's a lot that goes on between a submission being received and then actually a risk being bound within a policy admin system, for example. And then the fourth point is really the submissions. So provide, a handful of submissions, 3 to 5 submissions, the ground truth associated to them, to allow the providers to configure the platform. So we'd expect to receive those assets 1 to 2 weeks before, no more. No provider should require those assets before that time period, and that sets you up for a really good, productive live session. So within the live session, obviously, we're running the extraction, looking at the performance of the submissions that we haven't seen and that we haven't had the ground truth for. So it's as real life as we can get this scenario to a real life production environment. The other thing within those live sessions, as we touched on earlier, is how easy is it to make those refinements? If we're not getting the expected output, how easy is it to augment that, to change that, to be reactive, to achieve the data points and the accuracy that you require? So there's something quite magical about going in and changing, certain descriptions to change the behavior of the platform and allowing you to get the outputs that you require. The other points, I guess, is around the flexibility of the platform and really seeing how easy it is to add an additional field, to create an entire brand new schema. So this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be testing various different data points as you go throughout your digitization journey. And then, because of the live environment in which we're going to be processing those submissions, the third final step is really about what you do after that proof of concept. So it's really around getting those output values, which you should be measured on, across to the client as quickly as possible, immediately after the workshop. That then doesn't allow for any kind of human interaction with any of those, and you're getting a real honest output in terms of the extraction performance. Those would be, I guess, the kind of 3 stages. Typically in a proof of concept, we would run through, as I say, we'd probably have 1 to 2 weeks notice on the preparatory work. You then run a half-day workshop for the proof of concept and allow prospects and customers to get hands-on with the platform. And then the kind of follow-up is looking at the accuracy and feeding that accuracy back to the various different vendors for feedback.
A couple of follow-up questions on what you just said. In this case, I promised to go one by one through the questions. And the first one, you were referring to live processing, live session. Can you explain that a bit more? Is it, when you say live, it means like in the POC, the platform is fully integrated with the client systems, or are you talking about perhaps qualify that?
Yeah, really good question. So in most POCs, you're looking to assess the capability of the platform. So what I mean by a live, doing this live, is we turn up to the session in the meeting, you share 10 or 15 various different submissions with us that we then process through the platform and view the output results. So the major thing that you're testing here is the performance and the accuracy. So go back to Zaheer's first point. So that's really what we're testing. What we don't often test is the integration capability. All of these platforms are fully API enabled, so you shouldn't necessarily have too many concerns in terms of the integration capabilities. Where we do see some challenges, I would say, is if you focus on pure extraction. So I'll give you an example around occupancy. So you can extract a value from a slip or an MRC or from an SOV around the kind of occupancy of a particular property. However, that may or may not be in the same format, usually within your pricing tool or your underwriter workbench. That those will be pick list values of 80 to 100 different values. As I say, there's often a disconnect between what you might receive from a client or from a broker and actually the information that's then required to push that into a downstream system. So that's a really important point to make sure that as part of your kind of target output schema, you're not just focusing on the extraction, because if you're just focusing on the extraction, there's a whole load of transformation that needs to go on within the kind of post extraction process. And it's big, if you think about all the different variations of what an occupancy could be versus what the target occupancy output you require, you're into a situation where it's all, a bunch of mapping tables, and that's just for one specific field. So that's where we see a lot of deployments with some clients that are using kind of older technology fall foul of. So yeah, we wouldn't typically integrate, I guess, with the downstream systems as part of the deployment, or part of the proof of concept, I should say. That you would say for deployment.
Right, yeah, that was very helpful. The different question, this perhaps is more of a comment, because I was thinking as you were describing the POC, it was quite obvious how you test the digitization performance. But one of the points Zaheer mentioned at the very beginning was about how does the platform scale across use cases, lines of business, geographies. And I think you mentioned, Rich, as part of that live session, you should also be like doing a full configuration from scratch. Is that how you test that type of capability?
Yeah, exactly. We see that clients are looking to become self-service in this capability. I think that in the past, then that a lot of customers have been beholden to the vendor, and a lot of customers, I think, particularly as they move much more towards kind of an enterprise-wide ingestion capability versus specific kind of proof of concepts or line of business or use case specific deployments. There's a huge desire from the insurance market to bring this capability in-house. So and to be responsible for their own destiny. They don't want to be beholden to a third party, which obviously makes sense in terms of a speed to market, the ability to test and build experiments, and see what's working and what's not working. So yeah, the ability to then be agile and flexible and to be able to add those fields, create those schemas from scratch, add on different languages, tailor this based on different geographic requirements is really, really important for sure.
And the last question on what you said, you mentioned as part of a POC process, you would request I think you mentioned a handful of examples in advance. Obviously, if it's a handful, it's not for actually training the platform. So what is the goal of having that handful of cases in advance?
Yeah, so it's absolutely not for training the platform. It's to refine the configuration. So if you combine the handful of submissions, the 3 to 5 per use case, and then the ground truth, is to make sure that we're not overly fitting the descriptions based on on a very narrow data set. So what we want to get to is a position where we're confident across 3 to 5 submissions that we've configured the platform in a way that it will be able to perform well in the live extractions. But as you say, there's no pre-training, there's no annotating documents as you would do in kind of legacy machine learning technologies. It's literally just so we can test the configuration to make sure that we're extracting the right values in line with the ground truth.
That makes sense. So back to you, Zaheer. You've obviously led dozens of these POCs also. You in the US. We would love to hear your thoughts on what do you enjoy the most in these processes?
I'm a bit biased because all this conversation from Rich about live POC talk has the blood flowing. I think it is the live POC. I mean, when the energy and excitement around the live POC, let me see if I could try to capture that. I mean, Rich mentioned it, right? Nerve-wracking, magical, but it's quite thrilling. So you go in, you sit with the carrier's team, like, all right, let's pull up the platform, let's configure it together, let's process it real data, like their submissions. Just saying what Rich said. You get their real submissions, you process it real time, and they see that power right there. It's a massive leap. I mean, for folks that have been in this space from just a few years ago, I'm sure many folks remember you painstakingly have to go form by form, like, oh, here's where the effective date is. And the limitations in that approach were massive, right? So now that world is just completely gone. And then you watch the carrier to be able to realize that, oh, I could take control of this. I could see, and that usually happens in the middle of the POC, right? So beginning of the POC, they come in the live POC, they're like, oh, we're gonna see amazing live extraction. They may be talking it a bit up, but then they see it. It is magical. It is thrilling. It's exciting for us. It's exciting for them. But midway through, I think the POC, when they start using the self-service platform, they start to realize that they actually have full control and they can make the platform do exactly what they want to do. They see it happen. It's right in front of them. No smoke and mirrors, fully transparent, hands-on. And that first moment when they start to realize that the technology can deliver, you can't get tired of that. That's probably the best part about a POC.
Would you say the same, Rich? Anything else to add?
Yeah, I finally think about it in 2 dimensions. So one, I think is in terms of the output, because the output is ultimately what you're interested in, because that's what's going to drive the business benefit, your straight through processing, create capacity within your organization, improve the kind of speed to market, to get back to brokers. So the accuracy is clearly going to be really important. I think that the magical part is maybe when it's not quite extracting the values that we expect, and you go and make a tweak, or you add in an additional data point, and you can see within 3 or 4 minutes, then just that data flowing through as an output. So that's the real kind of magical point. You can see clients kind of go on a journey of kind of almost of discovery in terms of the kind of excitement, and their eyes were opening, and you can see in their body language they're leaning in, and they start to kind of drive the platform themselves without kind of too much direction from us. That, I think, is what technology should do, right? That's the beauty of it.
That's fantastic. The one last thing we have not touched much on, because I think one of the things, the dimension you mentioned, Zaheer, at the very beginning, was about this operational experience. So the experience that the client teams doing exception management have with the platform. So perhaps can you summarize, like, what is typically the feedback from those teams when looking at a platform like ours?
I think there's, if we look at, again, from an organization's lens, they probably have 2 different user types when they are using this specific platform. One is, how do you have an operations view, like you said, where they could see the intake and the flow of risk coming through, and being able to see who's on point, who's working it, because as you can imagine, the volume of what's coming through the intake is massive. And to be able to have a tool to be able to see what's coming in, what stage it's at in the process. Has it been processed? Is it being reviewed? Is it completed? Has it been passed to the downstream system? So having that visibility is key. And then the second one is that human in the loop experience, which is massive, right? Because that's where a lot of the time, I would say, is kind of lost, in the sense that even if you have an amazing extraction, let's say you have the best extraction, but having a read-only view of that extraction is not really going to help, right? Because as you can imagine, there's a big aspect of change management and trust in the system. So when an ops team comes into this, number one, they can see the full view. But when you look at the admin team going into our exception management platform and saying, wait, how did it find this value? There's no way across these 300 pages. Being able to just quickly click on it, and within seconds, you see where it was found. And you could, if you disagree, you could quickly capture something else. That right there is really what drives that transformative experience, where not only do they trust the output, but it's enabled, their trust is enabled by the ability for the platform to show where it was, or in some cases, well, I found this value 5 times, and in one of the 5 times, it was conflicting data points. Being able to see that gives that confidence in the platform. And over time, you see that time improving too from an efficiency perspective. And that's exactly what these guys are looking for.
Thank you. So this has been really useful to getting both of your perspectives to understand what does a POC look like and what our clients experience. So final question back to you, Rich. If somebody listening to this episode is thinking, okay, how do I know more? What should they do?
I guess there's a couple of answers to that. I guess if you're interested in finding out more, then there's lots of information on our website, cytora.com. You can also request a demonstration through there as well. Secondly, and I guess more topical to this, if you're interested in hearing more around our POC best practices, then we have a guide in terms of how to run these proof of concepts in line with best practice. So happy to share that with anyone that might be of interest.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both of you. I think it's been I think it's probably like a 30-minute summary of best practices and experiences from running POC. So thank you both of you for making the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye now.